The god's wood of the Red Keep held the last light of day like a shallow bowl of dusk. The trees, oaks and elms and slender ash, rose from clipped grass that smelled faintly of rain and stone, their leaves stirring with the whisper of the bay. There was no heart tree here, no pale weirwood bleeding red sap to listen. This was a place made to be a memory of worship, not worship itself, a green room in a red castle. Crows spoke from the battlements far above, and the wind carried a trace of the city, roasting meat, horse, tar, and the brackish breath of the Blackwater. Ned Stark waited under a stand of elder, the leather of his scabbard warm against his palm, the book he had carried like a confession in his other hand. The lineages and histories of the great houses of the Seven Kingdoms had the smell of old vellum and dust, but to his mind it smelled of the crypts of Winterfell, the slow breath of stone and the last vows of the dead. Each page had been a step down a dark stair, each name a torch guttering in wind. He had counted the names of Baratheons and the children they had sired on many women, highborn and low, tar-black hair, eyes like the storm, a jaw like a mailed fist. Over and over, the seed is strong. When the last light fled the leaves and the first crab lamps kindled in the city below, Ned heard the tread he had been waiting for, a heavy, bullish stride with no patience for quiet. Robert Baratheon came through the trees with Barristan Selmy a half-step behind, silver hair bright as water under the dusk. The king's breastplate stretched across him like a bell about to crack. His beard was a thicket shot with gray. A wine stain lay along one sleeve as if he had throttled a vineyard. He had a short boar spear in one hand out of habit, though there were no boars in the godswood. He looked at Ned as a man glances for the weight of his own shadow. "7 hells," Robert said before Ned could bow. "If this is to be another game of riddles, Stark, I'll have wine. I've had enough of reading for 10 lifetimes." "It isn't a riddle." Ned's voice came out low, more grave than he intended. "It is only the truth, and it won't wait." Robert grunted, set the butt of the spear into the grass, and looked at the book as a man eyes a stranger asking to share his table. "You and your bloody books." Barristan said nothing. The Lord Commander's eyes were the winter sea, pale and steady, his knuckles white around the hilt at his hip. Ned knew him to be a man who remembered the weight of every oath he'd ever spoken. He was there for the king, not for Ned Stark. It was enough. The rustle of skirts came soft through the trees. Cersei Lannister arrived robed in green that caught the last scraps of light, her hair a bright banner even here where light died. 2 Lannister men trailed her at a distance, royal guard by right, but lions in the heart. Her mouth curved, but it wasn't a smile. "How quaint," Cersei said. "A northern prayer meeting. Forgive me, Your Grace." The title was rich on her tongue, like a fruit she enjoyed tasting for flaws. "It seems I've come uninvited to a private faith." "You're not uninvited," Robert said, though his tone suggested he wished it otherwise. "Eddard has something to say to us. Both of us." "It should be said where walls do not whisper," Ned answered, "and where a tree would keep it. The Red Keep has few such places." "Get on then," Robert snapped. He lifted a hand as if to swat a fly. "I have a boar to kill in the morning, and if this is about tourneys, debts, or your sister's grave, spare me the sermon and say the thing." Ned felt the book weight his arm like a sword. He opened to the page he had marked. The arc of names began at Orys and climbed, crossing with Florence and Tarths, Penroses and Bucklers, black as storm clouds wherever a child was born. He turned another leaf. "I have gone through 50 years of births, Your Grace. Every marriage of House Baratheon to a high house, every child they sired." "Look." Robert stared at the page as if it meant to bite him. "Looks like a baker's tally. Words and names." "Hair," Ned said. "Eyes. Line by line. Your father, your brothers, your cousins. Each time a Baratheon weds, the children take the black. There isn't an exception here. Not one." Cersei's laugh was soft and cruel. "Is this about my son's hair, Lord Stark? Shall we hold up our babe before the small folk and let them judge the length and curl?" "It is about the truth," Ned said. "The truth," she echoed as if tasting a sour. And where did you find this truth? In a dusty book? The North must be a dull place indeed if men make war on ink. Robert's eyes had not left the page. He was frowning in a slow, bewildered way that stirred something like pity in Ned's chest. The king had never been meant for numbers or names. He was meant for fields and banners and wind, hot blood, and the slam of a hammer on a shield. But Robert took the book as if it were a warhammer and turned the leaf with a thick finger. Go on. Ned took a breath that smelled of grass and old water. John Aaron died searching for this, Your Grace. He came to know what I know. The seed is strong, he told me. He sought the truth in the faces of your children and in other faces. Maya Stone in the Vale, Edric Storm in the Stormlands. A boy at a smith's in the city whose blue eyes mirror yours so clearly they scold the air. All your get have the look of you. The words grew heavy. He could feel Lyanna in them, the taste of blood and rose petals. But Joffrey does not, nor Myrcella, nor Tommen. They have their mother's coloring. Many children do, Cersei said. Her voice cooled until it might have cracked. A mother has some say in the making of her own offspring, if you hadn't heard. Ned closed the book and held it as if it would keep him standing. It's not only hair and eyes, it's the count of it over decades. And there is this, all three of your children are fair where their father is dark. All three are of a piece. And they have another father available to them who is fair, golden, and always near. A father who swears to wear white but lies as easily as he breathes. Barristan's head turned a fraction, not towards Cersei but towards the sound of the words. Robert's fist tightened on the spear. It made a small iron cry against the grass. Cersei did not flinch. You think this is clever. You think you have trapped me with the scraps of old men's notes and a few bastards who smile at you to keep their bread. What if the child of a Baratheon and a Lannister took after the lion for once? What if the gods decided to be amused? Robert's voice was a thing dragged across stone. Is it a jest, then? Tell me it's a jest and I'll laugh. I have need of laughter. No jest, Ned said, and in the saying he felt the world tilt and lock. I am sorry. I am sorry for the king. I am sorry for the realm. I am sorry for the children most of all. Cersei took a step, and her green silk murmured like a stream. She looked at the king as she would look at a pawn, not a knight, and her smile was a cut. Do you hear him? He is sorry for the king. He would put a crown on your brother and call it mercy. Robert lifted his eyes from the book at last. They were not drunk tonight, not yet. They were old and tired. There were pits in them where laughter had lived. He set the book on the grass with a growl as if it had burned him. Answer him, he said to Cersei, though he did not look at her. Answer him clean. Cersei's voice dropped until the trees leaned in to hear. Joffrey is your son in name and law and will be your heir as the gods intended. Myrcella is your daughter. Tommen is your boy. What else matters? What else? Robert repeated very softly. Honor. Oath. The whole fucking realm. That's what else. He turned his head at last and looked at her. Ned saw the moment strike. Saw how her face had become something Robert had never learned to read. How many years had he ignored it? How many hunts, how many wenches, how many cups? Is it true? She said nothing. The wind came again, stronger, and shook light loose from the leaves. Barristan's hand had found the pommel, but it did not move. Jaime, Robert said, not truly asking. My own Kingsguard. Your sworn sword, Cersei said. And in this at least there was something like pride. The only man who is not a drunk or a brute or a fool. A true knight. Robert's face went the color of old bone. For a heartbeat Ned feared him to drop. Feared the long-ignored wine had unseated his blood. Then the king moved. It was not graceful. It was a brute animal's lunge. He seized Cersei by the arm the way a smith takes a poker and flung her to the grass so that the green wrapped her like a tide. One of the Lannister guards had a sword a third from its scabbard before Barristan was there. Steel bright. So quick it seemed to appear from the air. The lion froze and let the sword slide back with a scrape that sounded like a swallow. Robert stood over his queen with his chest heaving. You made me a cuckold and a fool. You needed no help, Cersei said. She did not try to rise. She bared her teeth in something that was not a smile. You have always been those things. You were those things long before you wed me. Ask the ghost you hunt in your cups every night. Ask her if she loved a barge of a man who hit like thunder and thought like rain. Robert's hand moved as if to strike, then fell. The boar spear toppled and lay along the grass. He was not trembling. He was an anvil learning it could ring. Get up. She stood with the grace of someone who had never fallen in her life. And what now? She asked, and if there was a tremble, it was too fine for any but a northern ear to catch. Will you name a traitor and name yourself a fool before your court? Will you cut down your children in their beds to make room for your brother? Will you set the small folk to whisper that their king was too weak to keep his queen? Robert closed his eyes. They are not my children. They are children, Ned said, the words torn from some hurt place. Whatever they're making, whatever their mothers and fathers chose, they are children. Cersei laughed once more. Lo, there, your grace, there is your hand. He will chide you when you would act, sing you to sleep with counsel while lions feast. Robert lifted his head and looked at Barristan. Lord Commander, your grace, take the queen to her chambers and set 2 of your best on her door. 2 you trust. Send the rest to find her cubs. No harm to them. The words sounded as if he choked on them. They are to be kept apart. Gently, gently, his voice cracked. If any Lannister puts hand to steel, I will hang every one of them in the yard and make your white cloaks watch. Barristan bowed, no more than the neck, and signaled. The Lannister guards swayed as if the ground had gone soft. They dared a glance at Cersei, but the queen had become a green statue. She turned her face to Ned with a look that was all winter. No storm, no melt. Remember this, the look said. Remember where mercy leads. Then she let Barristan take her arm. Robert rubbed at his eyes with the heel of his hand until his skin reddened. He seemed to shrink where he stood, as if a long-held armor had fallen from him and left a man underneath. Stark, your grace, you will do this clean, quiet. I won't have riots in my city. I won't have blood in the corridors. If we are to cut, cut once and let it bleed out into cloth. He kicked the book as if it had been a cur. God's damn Jon Arryn for dying. Ned bent and picked up the volume. Jon Arryn died because he would not ignore what honor set before him. If there is any damnation, your grace, it sits on those who poisoned him. Pycelle talked to me of a fever, Robert snarled. The old fraud talks for whoever fills his bowl. He lifted the boar spear and looked down the shaft. Then his gaze shifted to the city below, where lamps had strewn necklaces along the hills and the river threw back patched gold. A wind came cold from the bay, and with it the cry of a gull. Stannis, Robert said, and his mouth worked around the name like a blackthorn. 7 bloody hells. I'll have to send for Stannis. He is your heir, Ned said. He is a hard man. He is a just one, Ned said. He thought of Stannis's jaw, clenched, of the eyes that wanted no warmth and offered none. And a lawful one. The realm would be better for a lawful king after so many years of storm. Robert barked a short laugh, dead of humor. The realm would be better for a bed of roses and a rain of wine. He turned and walked, and Ned walked with him. The gods would watch them go without judgment. They did not go to the Tower of the Hand or the small council chamber. Robert took Ned through a half-lit hall where tapestries displayed kings with antlers taller than their bodies and lions chewing men. Through a door where a guard sprang to rigid attention. Into a small chamber that smelled of tallow and old wood. There was a table and a chair, a window that held a slice of the city, and a chest with iron bands. Robert found a flagon and a cup and poured with a hand that steadied itself by will alone. Drink, he said. Ned shook his head. Drink, damn you. I won't be the only one tasting this night. Robert appended his cup in a swallow and set it down not so gently. You and I, he said then. It sounded like a start to an old song. We were boys together. We were men together. We became something else together. He gestured to the crown on a table in the corner. This thing is iron. It melts on your brow. I have been burning for years and didn't notice it. Your Grace. Robert. Say my name like you once did.
Ned swallowed.
Robert. The king's face softened into the ghost of itself. Some younger man with a hammer over his shoulder and wolf blood at his side. If this were the trident again, I'd know what to do. If it were Rieger in his rubies, I'd know what to do. But it's a woman in a green dress and children with hair like wheat and a brother I can hardly stomach. I want to kill something that deserves it. He stared at his hand. I have killed the wrong things, Ned. Too many of the wrong things. We will not kill children, Ned said softly. Stannis would, Robert said, not as a threat but as a riddle. Stannis would keep the law. The law does not ask for that. Ned saw Lyanna laid upon her bier in a circle of winter roses. Promise me, Ned. Nor does honor. Robert grimaced.
Honor.
You and your honor. It's a good word when arrows fly. It's a hard word at a table. He blew out a breath. Call the council. Call them now. Bring that spider. Bring the old fool with the chain. Bring that sly little fucking. He waved for the word, couldn't find one, and laughed. You know which. Peter, Ned said. Him. Robert wiped his mouth. Renly is in his rooms mooning at the night of flowers. Drag him as well. And send for the commander of the city watch. Robert's eyes narrowed. I'll have my guards paid from my own purse this month. I'll not have lion's gold buy me a black blade through the ribs. Ned inclined his head. Yes. And Stark, Robert said as Ned reached the door. Ned turned. The king looked at him as if across snow. She said I was a brute and a fool. She was right, but a brute can still swing, and a fool can still be led by the right hand. Don't let me be led into a pit. I will not, Ned said. The small council came to the council chamber like birds to a cold field, wary, pecking the air. Varys moved with his whisper of silk and watched everything with his half-tragic eyes. Pycelle creaked in like a cupboard door and breathed leaves. Littlefinger smiled like a weir on a river, still and killing. His hands folded, his beard trimmed to a point precise as an apology. Renly entered last with Loras Tyrell just behind. Not on the council but welcomed here by Renly as another perfume. The night of flowers smelled faintly of rose oil and steel, his gaze all courtesy, his blade all comment. Robert did not sit. He stood behind the chair to remind the room that the chair was his by whim. Ned took his place at the table with the book set like a law before him. We have a matter, Robert said, wasting no honey. You'll hear it. You'll hear my will on it. And you'll do as you're fucking told, or I'll have your heads on spikes and feed your balls to the dogs. Even yours, Pycelle. I've seen stones larger. Pycelle's beard rustled as if something lived inside. Your Grace, he began with wounded dignity. Surely the council. Shut it.
Robert pointed at Ned.
Tell them. Ned told them. It was simple as the drop of a guillotine blade laid out clean. The evidence, the blood, the hair, the mathematics of inheritance older than any of them. He named names and places not because he wished to, but because this was coin to pay a realm. Varys listened as if to a sad play he'd seen performed 5 times. Pycelle grew pale and paler, though the old man's eyes flickered to the door again and again like a hound to a scent. Littlefinger's smile sharpened until it became almost a knife. Renly's jaw worked and he glanced at Loras as if the night might furnish him with courage. When Ned finished, there was silence. It hung long enough for the candles to gutter. Littlefinger broke it with a small sigh that sounded like money counted well. It is a pretty sum you've added, my lord. If it balances the books, I suppose I must approve. But a pretty sum is not the same as a paid debt. The city will not accept a ledger waved over their heads. They like crowns. They like golden-haired princes who ride by with smiles for their daughters. They like the queen who tosses them meat at feasts. They'll like bread better, Renly snapped, finding himself all at once. And peace. And no lions cutting purses tighter every year to feed their vanity. The people are not fools. They are exactly fools. Littlefinger said, pleasant as ever. Which is why they must be managed with care, not bludgeoned with law. If we mean to call 3 children by another name than Baratheon, we must have more than a scribe's ink to show. They will have my word, Robert said. Your word is iron, your grace, Varys murmured. But iron rusts when left in the rain. We must think of the storm this will bring. Lord Tywin sits in the west with more gold than the faith and 3 times the quiet knives. Ser Jaime commands men on the march and— Jaime, Robert said as if the name were a rotten thing. I want him brought to the city. I want him in white, where I can see him and he can see what he's done. And I'll see if his vows keep him still. Varys spread his hands in a gesture that was almost a prayer. Ser Jaime is not in the city. He departed days ago to join Lord Tywin's host. Since the affair at Littlefinger's door with Lord Stark's men, Ned thought of Jory, and the thought was a blade without a sheath in his chest. The room swam for a breath, returned. Then he is beyond our reach for now. Robert's mouth bent. Then I'll send a raven to Lord Tywin demanding his son return to answer the king's questions. And I'll summon Tywin to court himself. He kept me waiting 9 months for my bride. I'll make him wait 9 months on his knees for my leave to breathe. The talk went on and it grew teeth. Varys urged care, always care. Pycelle urged piety, the faith, the laws of marriage. Renly strangely urged speed. Take the queen and her brood tonight. Can be done quietly. I have 50 men with sure hands. A word, and they will. Robert eyed him. You had 50 men the last time you brought me an idea, little brother. 50 pretty boys in green cloaks. You meant to hand them to me like flowers. Where were they when I needed them in the stepstones? Where were they when Rhaegar ran? He knocked a fist against the chair. But this time you're right. We move now. Littlefinger folded his fingers and examined his nails. And after we have become the kidnapping council? After, Robert said. We will do the law. Cersei will answer. The High Septon will annul that thing our mother and father called a marriage. The children will be styled as the law styles them. I will name Stannis heir. Renly stiffened as if he had swallowed a bone. Stannis? Must it be Stannis? He glanced again to Loras and found no help there. The Knight of Flowers was a stone with a beautiful face. Must, Robert demanded, dangerous. Do you mean to put yourself forward? Renly's smile sprang up quick and bright. No, brother, never me. Only Stannis. He is not loved. Neither am I, Robert said simply. Love feeds a child. It buries a king. He looked to Ned. Write it, you with that straight hand of yours. Write it and bring it to me to sign and the King's Guard to witness and the High Septon to seal. And send ravens to Dragonstone, to every lord south and north, to the Eyrie, to Riverrun. I want the realm to hear the king's voice before the lion's roar can drown it. When they broke, Ned found himself walking with Varys in a corridor where moonlight made a river of pale along the wall. The eunuch drifted beside him like a bit of curtain loosed by a draft. You are a brave man, Lord Stark, Varys said, turning his head to examine a tapestry stitched with stags trampling serpents. Not brave. Ned felt the weight of the night settling. Only awake. Awake men make enemies quicker than sleepers. Varys laced his hands. There is a scent in the air. Of what? Smoke, Varys said, and smiled with an odd sadness. Before there is fire. They kept the seizure quiet because Barristan Selmy had learned, long ago, how to move the long white shadows of the Kingsguard without noise. He set Preston Greenfield and Ares Oakhart at the Queen's door and drew Mandon Moore from his watch to guard the children. And all the while Ser Boros and Ser Meryn were sent with letters for the city watch and the captain of the guard, so that when their hands were empty they might be caused to keep them so. Varys whispered to certain stewards who had no love for lions that no meat or wine should pass through certain doors unless it passed first beneath the noses of men chosen by Barristan himself. Lancel Lannister, all face and angles and eagerness, was turned away at Cersei's chambers with a message that made him blanch and redden by turns. He ran in circles for a time, a hound without a hair, then evaporated into the castle's breathing stone. The night stretched. The queen did not scream. Joffrey did, when Aerys Oakheart told him he would sleep elsewhere, and he had the misfortune to strike the Kingsguard with a half-closed hand. Aerys did not look at the hand. He took the blow in the jaw and turned the boy gently with an arm around the shoulders and led him away while the prince spat words that bruised nothing. Sansa cried herself to hiccups and clutched a ribbon as if it could anchor the world. "My father does not mean it," she said to the air. "He is mistaken. It is all a mistake. It is only—" Arya crept under a table and watched Tracy of the kitchens carry plates like shields. She thought of Syrio Farrell's voice. "What do we say to the god of death, little cat? Not today." She tasted iron in her mouth and didn't know if it was fear or biting the inside of her cheek. Needle lay where she had hidden it, wrapped in wolfskin and tucked behind a loose stone. If they came for her, if they came for Sansa, she did not finish the thought because the thought grew teeth. Ned slept a little in a chair in his solar and woke with his neck a snarl of pain and a candle eating itself in a puddle. And from somewhere a bell told a slow count of hours like a monk's patience. He wrote the letter Robert had asked for. It was not pretty. It did not speak of love. It named Stannis Baratheon as heir and named the reasons in careful lines, each word a soldier told where to stand. He thought of Catelyn when he set his seal. He imagined her hand on his arm, light, so light. He imagined the way she had looked at him when he had told her of the book, the faces. He imagined her looking west, to where the Lannisters sharpened knives under banners bright as blood. And he imagined his son in Winterfell, all stern mouth and urgent heart. He set aside imagining. It was a danger to the task. Robert read the letter at dawn with eyes red as if from smoke. He signed without comment and pressed the royal seal so hard that the wax bled up around his ring. He had not gone to the hunt. He wore a plain jerkin and a belt with a dagger that meant nothing but habit. "Let the ravens fly," he said. They flew. They sped from the rookery like black tears and were gone to Dragonstone, to houses great and lesser, to the Vale and the Riverlands. Somewhere, a storm was already thinking about the sea. By noon, the city knew something. The city always knew something by noon. The fishwives of Cobbler's Square set down their baskets to talk. The armorers on Street of Steel swung hammers and let them hang. Brothel doors opened and a few girls stood in the light to look at nothing with too much attention. The captain of the city watch came to the Red Keep with his cap in his hands and a weather eye for signs, Yano Slint, round, the kind of man who had learned that if he could not swing like a knight, he could put hands on others to swing for him. "The watch is the king's," Yano said, bowing as low as his belly allowed. "Always has been, always will be." "Good," Robert said without warmth, "and the king will fill their purses. Make sure your men know from whom their bread is buttered." Littlefinger delivered himself to Ned's solar in the afternoon with a silver dish of candied lemons, as if bearing tribute from the summer sea. He set it down as a hunter sets down bait. "A hard morning," he said, "perhaps a sweet afternoon." "I have no taste for sweets today," Ned said. "So stern." Peter took a lemon wedge between thumb and forefinger and held it up to the light as if discussing philosophy. "Do you know, my lord, I once told your wife I should like to marry her. She refused me. I have been learning to love refusals ever since." Ned stared at him until Peter laughed, delicately, and dropped the lemon back on the plate. "I am here to offer you exactly what you want most," Littlefinger said. "What is that?" "A quiet city. A quiet end to this." Peter lifted a shoulder. "Let the queen go. Let her go tonight with her children and a good escort, like a dove released under the eyes of the gods. She will fly to her father, and Lord Tywin will settle, as he always settles, with gold and a grimace. The king will name Stannis heir. He will set aside his marriage. He will take a girl with roses in her hair. We will all smile. The only price will be in a currency we can afford, pride." "No," Ned said. The word came before he had thought it. "No." "Because you are a Stark and no is your favorite toy," Littlefinger said with a bow of amusement. "Or because you like the smell of lion in a snare?" "Because the queen is guilty of treason," Ned said. "Because 3 children's claims to a crown are lies. Because if we let her go, she will turn the West into a sword and bring it to our throats. And if we keep her, Peter said, she will make herself into a martyr and Tywin will bring the same sword, only with better stories to tell on the way. My dear Ned, we do the same sums but prefer different totals. He leaned closer, lowering his voice until it was almost a caress and almost a bite. You do not understand this city. It does not love justice. It loves spectacle. It loves the appearance of justice so long as the bread is cheap and the brothels are clean. Give it the show of a queen set aside for barren bed and offense to the gods. Give it a new queen with a pretty laugh. Give it a prince whose smile is practiced, and the city will forgive anything. Ned stood. I will not forgive this, not with a smile to hide it. Littlefinger sighed, lifted the dish, and left without another word. Varys came in his place, like dusk finding a room left by sun. He will not forgive your refusal, Varys said. He is a man to keep his own account books. I am not opening accounts, Ned said. I am closing them. Varys' sigh was deeper, older. Justice is a coin always short in the purse, my lord. Do you counsel me to do as Peter suggests? I counsel you to place men where their hands can find swords quickly, Varys said. For there will be hands and swords. The hands came that night, but they did not come from where Ned had expected. They were soft hands, young, with knuckles still learning the business of work. Lancel Lannister came again to a door he had been turned from, his face sweat shining though the night was cool, bearing a skin of wine as if it were a flag of truce. He did not get past Preston Greenfield. He did not need to. Wine reached Robert's table by other paths, as it always did. But Robert did not drink deep that night. He sipped, frowned, and set the cup aside. Too heavy, he muttered. Tastes like flowers and lies. Loras Tyrell was on the yard at morning with a practice sword, and Renly watched him with a smile like a boy on a riverbank seeing a fish breach. I told him, Renly said as Ned came by. I told him if he would but wed Marjorie, the Tyrells would bring us enough men to trample the West Flat. Ned looked to Loras, who leapt as if the ground were a board and he a dancer. He will not wed while this is unresolved. Then resolve it, Renly said. His teeth flashed. Do you need my 50 men? Keep them near, Ned said, but not where anyone will think you mean mischief. I always mean mischief, Renly said cheerfully. They brought Cersei before the council at midday. She wore a gown white as a threat and pearls like bubbles at her throat. Her hands were bare. She looked at each man in turn, and each man felt weighed and found wanting or useful according to her secret measure. Aerys Oakhart stood by the door with his hand on his sword and a face that tried to be blank and succeeded only in being young. Your Grace, Ned said. She ignored him and looked at Robert, the length of her gaze like a blade. We will have this from the High Septon's mouth, Pycelle said, simpering with dignity. It is for the faith to declare an error in marriage. It is for the king to ask the question, Robert said. He folded and unfolded his fingers, and the sound was like leather groaning. I ask, the High Septon will answer, and you will answer me now. Did you lie to me these 17 years? Cersei tilted her head. I told you the truth many times, she said. You were too drunk to hear it. Robert flinched as if she had thrown hot water. He looked down and back at her. If you confess and ask the gods' mercy, I will grant you the king's. Cersei's smile cut. And what would that be worth? The mercy of a man who put babes' heads on walls and laughed. Ned felt the old pain rise. The argument about Elia that had cracked a friendship's bone years ago. He was weary of ghosts. You would do better to be silent, my lady. Do you see, your grace? Cersei asked, extending a hand toward Ned as if presenting him to the room. He keeps you like a dog and calls it honor. He will take your brother's side and call it law. Robert stood. The chair scraped a harsh sound that made Aerys' hand twitch on the hilt. Enough, Robert said. The word struck the room and quivered in the air. You will be confined. You will say nothing to anyone. You will see no one. You will wait for the High Septon's questions and my judgment. Meanwhile, he turned to Ned. Send a man to bring Stannis. Already sent, Ned said. Varys's voice slipped like silk through the crack of silence. There is the matter of Joffrey. What of him? Robert asked. He sounded like a man asked to name each hair in his beard. He is spirited, Varys said mildly. He will not content himself with soft words and soft beds while this goes on. He may attempt to rally those men in the keep who still belong to his mother, Littlefinger finished. He smiled as if to say he was only guessing, as if he were never less than 3 moves ahead. We could send the boy to the rock under guard. Say he goes to visit his grandsire in his time of trouble. Or we could send him to Dragonstone, to learn from his uncle what it is to obey. Cersei laughed then, a break in the wall. You prate of obedience. You, who never bent a knee without counting how much you might lift with it. Joff will do as he wills. He is a king. Not yet, Robert said. The tone was weary and chill. And never will be. In the yard as Cersei was led away, there was a moment where the air trembled. Joffrey appeared, chin lifted, fury and a too-hard pride making his face old and small at once. You will not touch her, he told Barristan. I am the prince. I am your future king. Barristan bowed from the neck in a way that should have taught the boy humility. Your Highness, Joffrey stamped as a child stamps. I command you, let my mother go. Your mother is the king's wife, Barristan said, gentle as rain. She will be treated with honor and kept in safety until the king's will is done. Joffrey reached for his sword hilt. It was not there. Aerys had removed it from his chambers while the boy had slept. He looked down at his empty belt as if a part of him had vanished. The flush rose to his ears. He looked then at Ned Stark, and his eyes were not child eyes. They were 2 bits of broken mirror, sharp and showing nothing of the face before them. You, he said, as if naming the shape of a nightmare. You did this. You have ruined everything. Ned stood and did not answer. There was nothing to say that would make less ruin for a boy taught lies. That night a fire started in a stable below the Gate of the Gods and took 3 buildings before it died. Men said it began with a lantern upset by a panicked groom, and that was true enough for the telling. In a wine sink on the Street of Sisters, a Lannister man in plain cloak pushed a knife into a watchman's ribs and was hauled to a cell where he sang nothing, though his face grew whiter by the hour. A goldsmith's apprentice tasted a coin and found it to be good and wondered why his master had paid him with such good coin. He did not ask, and he slept badly. The city trembled but did not yet crack. Quiet had a thin skin. Ravens brought replies. Lord Hoster sent a seal and a line. The Tullus will have the river run clean. Lisa Arryn sent nothing. Stannis sent nothing. But the raven did not return, which meant something. From Highgarden came a letter heavy with roses. Mace Tyrell, great and good friend to the king, presents his dearest daughter Marjorie, fresh as spring rain, to the king's consideration in all matters. The Reach would be pleased to support the crown in difficult times. The letter smelled of wax and cheese. Robert read the letters and grunted and said little. He had not gone to Cersei's door, had not seen the children. He hunted the yard with Barristan at his shoulder, taking practice swings with a blunted hammer as if to remind his arms what they were for. Sweat ran into his beard. He cursed less, he smiled not at all. On the 3rd day, Tywin Lannister's reply arrived. It was short, precise like a blade. The Lord of Casterly Rock denied the base slanders against his blood, declared himself the king's leal servant, demanded the immediate release of his daughter and grandchildren, and took personal affront at the insult to his house. He would be coming east with an escort to discover how such calumnies had found voice in the king's own court. He'll come with an army, Renly said. Let him, Robert answered, yet his voice had no relish. We'll have men to meet him. Will we? Littlefinger's tone was mild. The Vale is deaf. Dragonstone is silent. Dorne spits in the sand at the thought of you. The Riverlands bleed under raids. Rumor says by a mountain that rides. The north is far. The Reach may come for tribute. Pardon. For love. His smile twitched. But love is expensive when it lives in a golden holdfast and eats from silver plates. "We will have the Stormlands," Renly said hotly. "We will have them," Robert cut in, the steel of command ringing briefly in him. "And we will have the Reach if I must marry roses and bathe in bloody perfume. The realm will have peace." He looked to Ned. "We move before Tywin crosses the Mander. We must break his teeth while he's still chewing the West." "You mean to go to war?" Pycelle wheezed, as if war were a word that fouled his lungs more than age. "Your Grace, the Faith. The Faith can pray while men die," Robert snapped. "They are very good at prayer. I am good at killing, and Stannis is good at counting. Between us, we will make a kingdom again." Ned felt the shape of it settling like armor on a cold morning. He had not wanted war. He had not wanted this city, these walls. He wanted snow and the sound of wolves far off. But wars came as winters did, and a man could not bar them with a wish. "If we are to make ready," he said, "we must gather in the Riverlands. Tywin's first bite will be there." "Then go," Robert said, and there was a sudden old joy in his face like summer seen through a door. "Go and lead them as you did at the Trident. Take the Tullus and the Arryns if you can pry Lisa from her fears. Take the Stormlords that Renly will bring. I'll bring the Reach if it takes my own name on a marriage contract to do it. And I'll come after with whatever I can scrape from the city when we've got some sort of peace in these bloody halls." Ned thought of Cersei behind her door, quiet as a coiled snake. He thought of Joffrey pacing like a tethered animal. He thought of Littlefinger counting his coins and Varys counting his knives. He thought of Sir Island's cold eyes and Janos Slynt's warm hands. He did not like leaving Robert in this den with barely tamed lions. "I should not leave the king." "You should," Robert said softly, and for a moment his voice was as it had been years ago, a friend's voice at a dawn fire. "You are not my nurse. You are my sword. Put yourself where I need the cut." So he went, though his feet did not want to go. He kissed Sansa's hair while she slept and found it smelled like lemon and wool. He found Arya awake behind a chair, her eyes bright enough to light the room. "You will come back," she said with a certainty that made his throat ache.
Yes, Helit.
He hoped to make it truth by sheer will. He left a guard for them that he might trust. He spoke to Syrio Farrell and saw in the Bravosi's liquid eyes a promise that was a blade in itself. He put Jory's name on his tongue and swallowed, and there it stayed. He took men he could rely on and horses that could carry them and went out by the gate of the gods at dawn, as the sky ran from slate to copper at the rim. Behind him, the city muttered. Before him, the King's Road ran north like a vein in the land. The first 2 days gave him the shape of rumor. Gregor Clegane had burned a village on the Mummers Ford and taken 3 girls for a road that would not have them back. A party of Fryguards had been waylaid on the Trident's west bank. The Bridge Lord's pride stung. Hoster Tully's blood was thin these days, but his banners could stee. Allel be raised. Edmure, his son, had blazed at the insult and ridden out with a river's pride and was not yet come home. Lisa Arryn had sealed the Eyrie and would not answer a knock if the gods themselves brought it. The Riverlands, as ever, was the place where every trouble came to bathe. They found the first ruin on the 3rd day, a hamlet of 6 houses and a sept of daub and wattle that had collapsed like a man struck down mid-prayer. Ned walked through the ashes with the taste of smoke thick in his teeth and a white heart beating in his throat. A dog, half burned, lay with its feet under it as if asleep. A child's toy, a carved bird with one eye, lay by a well. The well was choked with thatch and ash. A skull looked up from inside it with a curious, patient gaze. Harwin, who had ridden out from Winterfell the day he had first been given leave to sit a horse and had never learned to stop riding since, set his jaw. "My lord," he said, and left the rest unsaid. There was a place for grief, and there was a place for anger, and there was a place for other things. "We bury what human remains we can find," Ned said, "and we send word to Lord Hoster that we are come." At Riverrun, the Tully trout flew high and bright, and the water beneath the walls glittered as if glad of sunlight. Hoster was thin as a reed in a sickbed that seemed to have eaten him down from the man he had been. Catelyn was not there. She had gone east, then north, then had vanished into a web of her own making with a captive whose name put a dry taste in Ned's mouth. Edmure had ridden out and not returned. "I will not see my house shamed by lions," Hoster whispered, when breath would serve him. "Not again." "It won't be," Ned said. "There is a boy," Hoster said, eyes clouding. "He needs his father." Ned's hand tightened on the bed rail until the knuckles whitened. "He has a father," he said. The words were both true and false in too many directions. Hoster's hand flopped like a fish and lay still. They spoke that night with Ser Brynden Blackfish under a banner in a hall that smelled of oat and old wine. Bryndon's face was a map of scars a man had learned to live with. He listened to Ned's plan and nodded, as if each word found the place Brynden had set for it before hearing it. "We'll harry the mountain's foragers and deny him forage," Brynden said. "We'll pull his teeth until there's nothing left but gums. Then we'll lead him where the rivers do the killing." "We'll need more than that," Ned said. "Robert means to bring the Reach to heal under his kindness. Renly will bring the Stormlands. Stannis will bring Dragonstone, if not his heart. If Hoster can rally the Riverlords, and the North, we can crush Tywin between two wheels." "Between wheels," Brynden mused. "A good place for the Lord of Casterly Rock to be. He's lived too long under his rock." They sent ravens and riders, and banners unfurled like a field of flowers in a broken season. Ser Beric Dondarrion came to Riverrun with 12 good men to take the king's justice against Gregor Clegane. Ned looked into the young knight's eyes and saw the kind of honor that did not understand how easily it bled. He gave the boy his blessing and as many men as he could spare, and watched him ride away with a feeling of watching fire carried into wind. In King's Landing, meanwhile, power learned new corners. Cersei did not scream, but her silence spread in the keep the way cold spreads in a body that has begun to die. Servants whispered of her pacing. Joffrey sought allies and found only those who had already been bought by other hands. He cornered Meryn Trant once and hissed the promise of a prince into the knight's ear, and Meryn listened as a goat listens to a king, then went away to clean his sword and looked at its edge as if it might speak to him. Littlefinger met Janos Slynt 3 times in 3 days in 3 different places, and left each meeting with a look like a man who has discovered a vein of or in soil he had only kicked absently. Varys found Lancel weeping in a corridor and gave him a handkerchief with edges that whispered over soft cheeks. Lancel told him everything and nothing, as young men do when they are terrified of being found out and desperate to be noticed. Renly pressed Robert again to consider Marjorie. Robert knocked a cup off his table and then picked it up and apologized because he had seen himself in the gesture and hated the mirror. He took the letter from Highgarden a second time and looked at it as if it were a map and the only way out of a maze. He asked Barristan what sort of girl Marjorie was, and Barristan said he had once seen her smile at old men and children alike. "She has a queen's smile," Barristan said, which was the most the old knight would say of any woman who was not a sword. On the 5th day, a body washed up at the King's Landing quay, one of the small folk dressed in brown. There was a plum-colored wound under the ribs. Men said he had been in a tavern the night before talking about pretty lions and ugly wolves. Men said many things. The city pricked its ears. On the 6th day, ravens brought news like sparks. Beric Dondarrion had ridden to the Mummers Ford, and there the mountain had fallen upon him like a landslide. Some said Beric had been killed once, twice, thrice, and stood up each time pale as paper. Some said Thuras of Myr had sung and the boy had risen in the name of a foreign god. Some said he had died as all men die and that a man with red hair wore his helm now to keep fire in the Riverlands. The truth ran between and was still burning. On the 7th day, Tywin's banners poured like honey over a ridge west of the Green Fork and glinted there. He sent his own letters, and they were swords written in ink. He demanded his daughter's return. He demanded the head of any man who had spoken her name in dishonor. He demanded the king show his face on the field like a man. He did not mention war. He did not need to. Ned stood with Brynden on the outer wall, watching the evening lay itself down on water. "We need a victory," Brynden said. "A small one will do." "We need time," Ned said. "Time," Brynden mused. "I have found Lord Stark. that time is a cobbler who charges too much and returns the shoes worse than he found them. They had their victory by accident and courage. A raiding party under Sir Amory Lorch took a stretch too far and found themselves between two forked streams and two Tully pikes. The water and steel did their work, and the river ran brown for a drizzle of hours, then cleared as if ashamed. The men in the yard cheered, and the cheer ran a little way, then stumbled. War elates with the same hand it empties. Word came from the north in a wintry hand that made Ned's heart lurch. Robb Stark had called the banners. Young Great John Umber had laughed and then sworn. Galbart Glover had come in with 200 spears. The Manderleys had sent silver fish and oaths. Robb would ride south to Riverrun. Ned felt pride and fear twin in him like animals the same mother had birthed. He rode a raven back with a hand that shook and steadied itself by memory alone. Come swiftly.
Come carefully.
Bring grain. Bring men you trust. In King's Landing, another sort of battle lined itself. The High Septon, cheeks like soft loaves, received Cersei in the September of Baelor with pomp and a faint worry. The queen walked in white and said the words she had decided to say, and each word had a place like a knife laid in an orderly row. She did not confess. She did not name. She spoke of an unhappy marriage blessed with children. She spoke of a husband's neglect. She spoke of strength and the duties of a queen to protect her young. She spoke of slander and wolves who pretended to be shepherds. Outside, the small folk listened and nodded and muttered, and a few spat when a golden-haired man rode by. Robert sat at the back of the sept with his jaw set and his eyes bloodshot, and his fists clenched on his knees. Ned sat beside him and watched dust waver in light. When Cersei's voice finally fell still, the High Septon wheezed an answer about the god's mercy and the sanctity of marriage and the need to examine proofs. He did not look at the king when he said proofs. He did not look at anyone. He looked at his own hands as if they might be called on to break bread. You see, Cersei murmured as she passed Robert, and only Ned heard it. The realm loves a wife better than a whore. You threw away the first for the second long ago. Robert did not hit her. He did not even look at her. He stared ahead at a carved mother who had too many eyes and no sight at all. That night, with the moon a thin coin, Littlefinger brought to Varys's door a sack that clinked. They waited together, smiling in different languages. Janos Slint turned over in his sleep and dreamed of promotions. On the 9th day, Stannis Baratheon's raven arrived with its blunt message written like a set of rules. He acknowledged the king's letter. He would come. He would bring ships. He would bring men. He would not bring pardon or patience. He would bring order. The script itself seemed to dislike ink. Good, Robert said, cracking his knuckles. He will sit me a little straighter. He will sit us all a little straighter, Varys said. 7 hells, Renly muttered, and went to watch Loras ride in the morning mist as if training his eyes to love something other than what the realm offered. On the 10th day, Tywin moved. His outriders splintered a Blackwood force at Stonehenge. Ravens in the west began to vanish. A Sellsword company with red feathers took coin from a purse stamped with a lion. On the 11th day, a letter from Sunspear arrived at the same hour as a letter from Oldtown. Dorne would send no men to crown a Baratheon who had butchered Targaryen babes. The Hightowers would send a Septon with well-oiled words. On the 12th day, Ned Stark woke to find a page palming the door with a face that had learned to be expressionless. And behind the page, Syrio Farrell holding Arya by the shoulder. She was in the kitchens at dawn with flour on her nose, Syrio said. He made it sound like a high crime. She said she was going to steal a pie and leave the city to take it to the wall. That is foolishness. Arya scowled. You always say everything is foolishness, because almost everything is. Syrio tapped her brow with a long finger. But not you, little cat. Ned stared at them both until his vision blurred with relief. You will not go anywhere without a guard, he told Arya. There are too many knives in this city. I have a sword, Arya said, chin coming up. So do 10,000 others. He crouched to her height and felt his knee complain like an old friend. Listen to Syrio. he said into her eyes. Listen to him in this and in all things. Promise me you will keep your head low and your feet quick. Not today, she said. And if there was a smile, it was small and fierce. By the time Robb Stark came down into the Riverlands like the first real breath of winter, banners rippling, war had learned all the roads. The boy rode with a great gray direwolf at his stirrup like a shadow cut loose. He embraced his uncle under the walls of Riverrun, and then stood before his father with a face that wanted to be a man's face and was not yet done being a boy's. You shouldn't have come, Ned said softly, and his arms said the opposite when they closed around the broadness of his son's shoulders. He smelled horse and leather and snow that had been in memory too long. But I am glad you did. I could not stay, Robb said, his voice roughening and smoothing over words. Mother is. She is. He stopped and swallowed. Tyrion Lannister is free, he said instead. He won his way loose in the Eyrie. Lisa let him go. The Vale is like a house with its shutters closed while the roof burns. Ned watched the way Robb's hands held and released his reins as if they were a thought he dared not grip too hard. We will manage without the Vale for now. They managed. They moved along rivers and hedgerows, raided and vanished, struck and fell back, not grandly but effectively. Tywin's men grew cautious and then somber and then angry. Jaime Lannister rode east with too few scouts and found himself with too many trees that looked like men and too many men who moved like shadows. He obeyed instinct and galloped, and in galloping invited the ambush that closed like a book. It was not the Whispering Wood and it was not night, but the end was the same. The Kingslayer's horse went down in a sudden foss of spear points, and men with trout badges brought him up out of it writhing, his golden hair full of leaves and his mouth full of curses that did not sound like prayers. He killed 2 men with his wrists before someone had sense to club him senseless. They brought him to Riverrun bound, and set him in a tower with 3 locks and 4 men at the door, and there he lay with more dignity than perhaps the tower deserved. Robb stared at him with the fascination of a boy for a storied monster. He does not look like anything, Robb said. He looks like a man. He is, Ned said. That is the trouble with monsters. He sent a raven to King's Landing with this news, and another to Dragonstone, and a third to Casterly Rock. Then he sat alone in a room with stale air and thought how wars are untidy and victories are sharp on the tongue. In King's Landing the news fell like a stone into a pond and made ripples that slapped strange shores. Cersei smiled for the first time in days, a small private thing as if at a memory the walls could not steal. My brother will not be held long, she said to the High Septon's attendant, who had brought her a bowl of soup too cool to be comfort. He always cuts his way out. The attendant smiled as one smiles at a mad woman, and then went to tell Varys, who listened with a face that said nothing and eyes that said everything. Robert took the news with a grunt and a brief flare in the eye that looked very much like the man he had once been. Good, he said. We will trade him for something useful. For peace, Renly asked. He had mastered the art of asking for the thing he could not have as if it were a trifle. For time, Robert said. Littlefinger calculated without moving his lips and came out of his numbers with a profit. A quiet city worth a winter's rent. A queen in a white dress worth 2 brothels more. A Kingslayer behind a door worth a wager on the spread between fear and hope. He spoke to Janos Slynt and spoke again. He showed him a purse and then the promise of a tilting yard for boys who were ambitious of more than bread. And then, as all close things must to prove themselves, the storm broke. It broke not on a field under banners, but in a corridor where torches smoked and gave a light that lied about edges. The Queen's door stood under the watch of Mandon Moore and Preston Greenfield, the boy prince's door under Ares Oakhart and 2 Redcloaks who sweated from nerves though the night was cool. Somewhere down the hall a cup fell and rolled, ting, 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 as if some god announced a beginning. Janos Slynt came with 20 gold cloaks and a warrant with the king's seal. The seal was real. The hand that had guided the impression was not the king's. Janos held the parchment as if it were a standard. He smiled at Mandon Moore and saw nothing reflected but a dead lake. Stand aside, Janos said with a voice that had talked men into parting with their money. No, Mandon said. He had a mouth that made no more mercy than a knife does. "You have the king's warrant in your face," Janos said, and shoved the parchment nearer as if it would blind. Mandan could read. He could not read the hand behind the writing. "No," he said again. Steel came then, as it always comes when words tire. Came quick, bright, and ugly. Mandan Moore's blade went in under a gold cloak's rib. Preston slammed flat the head of another. Janos Slint leapt back with agility he had not shown since the last time he ran from a wife's anger. Somewhere a boy screamed. Somewhere a door opened and closed. Littlefinger, in a different corridor, heard none of it and smiled at nothing in particular. Then Barristan arrived. He came as if he were a passage in an old tale that begins, when needed most, there he was. His white cloak did not flow. It was a practical garment and had been tied properly. He moved without grace. He moved with efficiency. He struck a man on the wrist and the sword fell. He took a second in the hollow of the throat with the edge of his hand. He said, "Enough," and it had weight. "By whose order?" Janos shrieked, finally remembering to be outraged. "By whose?" "By the king's," Barristan said. Janos thrust the parchment as if it were a shield. Barristan did not cut the parchment. He cut the hand that held it. Janos shrieked again and went to his knees, clutching a hand that now had one finger less. "You mad!" The corridor filled with more gold cloaks, and then with men wearing antlers on their surcoats. The king's household guard, summoned by a boy Renly had set in motion hours ago with a casual word. There was a shoving, a confusion, a moment when the entire keep seemed to tilt. Then the tilt righted. The gold cloaks backed, angry and frightened, and dragged their captain with them, and the warrant with the king's seal lay on the floor with a smudge of blood across it like an unclean blessing. The next morning, Robert Baratheon sat in the small council chamber with a face like a boulder and called Janos Slint before him. The captain's hand was bandaged. He held himself poorly because he had never learned to hold himself well. "Who gave you leave to break my peace?" Robert asked. Janos dared a glance at Littlefinger, and found there the encouragement of a man who will not pay a debt unless shown he owes it. He dared a glance at Varys and found only the softness of snow over a pit. He dared a glance at Pycelle and found nothing useful at all. He swallowed. "Your Grace, the city." Robert rose. He had not risen so quickly in years, and the chair went over behind him. "Who?" Silence can be as heavy as a smith's hammer. "Fell now." Janos lifted his chin and made one brave, stupid choice in a life of choices made for comfort. He tried to lie without being told what to say. "It was the good of the city," he said. "The Queen." "Barristan," Robert said. "Your Grace. Take this man to the yard and remove his head." Janos choked on his breath. Littlefinger almost smiled because he found human life as interesting as a game he had seen played with strange pieces. Varys bowed his head because it was the sort of prayer he knew. Renly watched his brother with narrowed eyes and understood something new about him. Barristan did as he was ordered. He had done a king's unlawful orders before. He had refused them before. He knew the difference. This was not unlawful. This was simply unpleasant. Janos Slint went to the block weeping. His head went into the straw looking surprised. The city watch found itself under a new man. An older, drier reed who owed his place to Robert's wrath and nothing else. Robert drank that afternoon and did not enjoy it. He smashed a cup and told Ned, when Ned came back from the yard with white dust on his boots, "We are killing men we could use to kill other men. We are doing the necessary," Ned said. He did not look at the stain on the rushes where a man's life had clot into a brown hand. The war became itself fully a week later at the Green Fork. Tywin broke Roose Bolton there with cold disdain and good numbers and sent the Wolf's southern army back across the river in bloody tatters. He did not pursue. He sat instead like a spider that knows its web is vast. But with Jaime and Riverrun, a peace had been taken that Tywin could not easily replace. With the Reach moving under the gaiety of banners and the heavy tread of Levy, the map shifted beneath his hands. Robert came at last with what he had promised. Storm lords, grim men with weather in their eyes. Reach men, bright as wardrobes and fond of singing on the march. household knights whose armor fit too tightly because they had grown fat in peace. He rode not at the front but close enough to be seen, and the sight of him put a pound of courage in some men and an ounce of doubt in others. He found Ned by a stream with a winter taste to it, and embraced him like a brother and cursed him like a king for not having already finished. "You brought them," Ned said, looking at the green of the reach like spring itself breaking on a battlefield. "It may be enough." "It will be," Robert said, and in that moment Ned almost believed it entirely. "We will take Tywin between hammer and anvil, just as you said. Stannis will bring his ships upriver and cut their supply. We will cut their blood. Fuck this chessboard. I want a table I can flip." They made a plan because men are fond of plans. Plans turn chaos into squares and squares into comforting lines. The next day took that plan in both hands and bent it. The mountain came like a thing from a curse and fell on their left with a sound like a door breaking. The right held against foragers and fell upon them with spears that found eyes. The center moved forward slower than any had wished and faster than any had feared. Arrows stitched the sky with black thread. A man in the colors of House Piper rode past with blood soaking his sleeves and singing an obscene song, and then his head jerked back as if by a lover's hand and he fell without a note more. Ned found himself where he had promised to be, at the place where the line would break if he did not stand. He stood. His horse was killed under him. He rose out of a tumble with a shoulder that screamed. He found a man with the wrong sigil trying to find his belly with a spear and turned it and broke the shaft and used his sword the way it had wanted to be used since it had been forged. His breath came hard. He thought of Winterfell. He thought of the Godswood. He thought of a room in King's Landing where a girl practiced with a wooden sword and forgot fear. Robert was not a young man, but he was not yet a corpse. He took a boar's head crest off a Lannister and laughed, the first real laugh in months, then coughed, then hit a man so hard the man seemed to decided to sleep forever. "More!" he bellowed. "More!" It ended not with a trumpet but with the sullen drawing off of men who had discovered that dying for nothing is an unwise hobby. Tywin did not break. He folded. He went back, step by stubborn step, and when he reached a line of hedges that might as well have been a wall, he nodded and made his own men nod, and the West withdrew to lick and sharpen. They took what victory could be taken. 3 standards for wagons of forage, a dozen men who knew things, 2 who knew too much, and a quiet outcome that could be called anything if you wanted to carve it into a song. Ned looked at the carrion birds and decided that songs were as honest as accounts. He ordered the dead burned or buried according to the gods they had loved. He sent a messenger with a list of names and a note that said less than his heart. In King's Landing, the High Septon pronounced. He pronounced carefully, like a man stepping through nettles. The king's marriage was troubled. Its fruit was uncertain. There would be a formal hearing on proofs and blood. The gods would sit in judgment. Until then, the queen would remain under respectful constraint. The children would be treated with the honor due their station, which honor was no more defined than grace. The city took this and made a stew of it and ate it with gusto. Men wagered in alleys on whether Joffrey would be king. Women shared a smile and a shrug and went back to hauling water. Boys stormed an imaginary wall and shouted that they were kings. Knights went home to count their coin and decide which ribbon to tie to their lance. And then Stannis came. He came by sea in ships that were as humorless as the man himself. He came up the Blackwater with his banner. Yellow crown, red heart, dark and solid in the wind. He came into the Red Keep like a book shut in a man's face. He stood before his brother and bowed his head the breadth of a finger. "Your Grace," he said. "Stannis," Robert said with something like relief and something like dread. They went into a room where the world narrowed to a table and 2 men and a brother between with a heart like a bridge. Ned stood at the table's edge. Renly stood leaning against the wall, his expression the arrow he wanted to be. Varys melted into a corner and became part of the candledark. Littlefinger arranged his face the way a man arranges a garden to look less pruned than it is. Pycelle breathed. "You wrote," Stannis said, not quite a reproach. "I did," Robert said. "You named me heir," Stannis said. "I did," Robert said. "You were late to it," Stannis said. "But you were not too late." I have come to take what is mine. Robert scrubbed at his face. If you could take a joke, you'd be a happier man. I do not need happiness, Stannis said. I need order. I need law. The city is a boil. It must be lanced. Always with the pleasant talk, Robert muttered. Cersei is in a tower. Her cubs are watched. We will have the High Septon's verdict soon. Until then, we'll keep peace. Peace is not kept by waiting on priests, Stannis said. It is kept by closing doors and heads. Joffrey must be named what he is. The girl and the boy as well. They must be removed. Removed? Robert repeated dully. Gods, Stannis. From any line of succession, Stannis said, as if he had named a ration instead of a life. They can go to the rock. They can go to the wall when they are of age. They can go to the Summer Isles for all I care. But they cannot sit one seat from a throne that does not belong to them. I had a mind to spare them more than that, Robert said, and his tone dared anyone to call it weakness. Stannis did not call it anything. He stood with his jaw hard enough to crack walnut. There is also the matter of your marriage. I have a letter from Mace Tyrell that smells of butter and brags, Robert said. He wants me to look at his daughter as if she were a field he'd leased me. She is young. So are most women, Stannis said without interest. Marry if it suits the realm. It will soothe the reach. I care only that the line be righted. Renly moved off the wall, and his voice was a blade that had been oiled to squeak less. You would care if you had ever noticed a person in your life without wondering if he had broken a rule. You will not be king, Stannis. You will be a jailer with a crown. I will be what the realm needs, Stannis said. I do not require love. You will get none, Renly said. Enough, Robert said, suddenly very tired. Enough, enough, enough. He turned to Ned, who had stayed silent because the business of brothers is a forest a man should walk in with care. Tell me I am not going to drown in family. You are going to drown in the realm if you do not tread water, Ned said. But there is a shore. We have taken Jaime. We have held Tywin. We have Stannis. If you will marry the Reach, if you will let the High Septon give the city a semblance of justice, if you will keep the Queen alive and the children untouched, if you will let the North and the Riverlands fight the lion while the city is made safe. I will drown in ifs, Robert said, but not unkindly. Do it then. Do the things you do. Write the letters. Move the men. I will stand where you tell me to stand and hit what you tell me to hit. He looked at Stannis. And you will not take my city apart like a man taking a clock apart to see why it's broken. I will put the pieces in their proper place, Stannis said, which was as much a promise as he would make. That summer wore on with the scrape of steel and the hiss of wax over letters, with ravens and riders and the creak of wagons, with the songs of men who were not yet dead. Cersei did not confess. The High Septon did not condemn. Robert did not wed. The Reach camped on the King's Road and sent baskets of fruit and daughters in gossamer to be seen without being touched. Tywin withdrew to redraft his war and sharpen it. Jaime sat in a tower and played all the games he could with memory and hate and something that an honest man might call regret. Robb Stark won one skirmish and lost one road and learned to sleep like a soldier and wake like a wolf. Arya learned to move through halls as if she were a breath, and Sansa learned to be quiet and to watch and to see how words can be doors or walls. Jon Snow, far to the north, put his hand on cold stone and wondered at a different kind of war, but that was another road. In the end, no single trumpet closed the story as it began. There were 100 small notes instead, and the sound that came from the city when at last winter pushed its nose through autumn's cloak was not a cry but a long exhale. Robert stood on the balcony of a tower and looked down on a city that had not burned. He had become thinner, like a candle that has been asked to light too many dinners. He took a swallow of wine and set the cup down and looked at Ned Stark. "You saved me," he said, "from my enemies and from myself. I should hate you for it." Ned looked out at the roofs and the river and the sea that could carry a man away to where stories came from. "Do not," he said. Robert laughed softly. "I never could. I tried. The gods know I tried." He turned his head, and for a heartbeat it seemed to Ned that he stood again under storm clouds at a ford where a prince's rubies had sunk into silt. "Do you think we did right?" "We did what we could," Ned said, which was the closest thing to truth he had ever learned to utter. Robert nodded as if that were judgment enough. "Stannis will be the death of joy in this city," he said. "But the city will live. Perhaps that is the point." They stood together without speaking for a time. Down below, a procession wound its way through the streets. A mixture of small folk and septons and knights with banners slung. They bore no corpse and no bride. They carried bread and will cheese for a poor quarter, a reach custom, brought by men who had found a way to turn largesse into a weapon. The people laughed and fought over bits and sang a ribald song that had been composed yesterday and would be forgotten tomorrow. Ned thought of Winterfell, of a godswood where a true heart tree grew, bleeding its red tears into a pool that had known his father's face, his brother's, his own. He thought of the oath he had made to a dying girl with flowers in her hair. He had kept part of it. He had broken part of it. He would go on keeping and breaking as the world required and his soul permitted. He would write more letters. He would send more men. He would count the cost and never quite be paid. "Very well," Robert said at last, as if to the air. "If the realm lives, I can live with a few fewer jokes. Tell me what to sign." Ned went to his table and took up his quill and wrote the words that were needed. Varys came like a shadow to take them. Littlefinger came like a smile to read them. Stannis came like a door closing to fix them with the weight of law. Renly went out to watch Loras ride and smiled because that was what he did best. Somewhere Cersei smiled as well, but not for joy. She smiled because a piece moved where she had expected a different piece to move, and the game remained, and she was still in it. The city slept that night under a sky empty of dragons and full of stars. There would be more wars. There would be knives and cups and the slow grind of law. There would be winters that would test the marrow of any man. But for now the Red Keep's stones held. The Blackwater breathed. The bells did not ring morning. Ned Stark lay down in a bed that was not his and closed his eyes and saw a tree that did not grow here and heard a voice that was gone say promise me, and answered it in the only way he knew, by standing when the day demanded standing, by choosing when the hour demanded choosing, by holding to a thing made of fewer words than law and older than crowns. He slept and woke before dawn and went to work.